Okay, so in today's video, I wanted to share with you my review of the all-new Apple iPad Air 5 here. Now, I've had this guy here for about a week or so, and I know I'm late to the party, but I still wanted to go ahead and share what I think of this tablet here with you guys. Let's go ahead and jump in. Now, first things first, in terms of design, nothing has changed here when compared to the predecessor, the iPad Air 4 that I reviewed on the channel here. And if you have been following the channel for a while, then you probably caught some of those videos that I made on the iPad Air 4. And if you pay even closer attention, you will see that it looks exactly like this one right here. Now, that doesn't mean that there haven't been any major changes. In fact, I would say au contraire, my friend. There have been so many major changes to this line here. Now, we're going to talk about whether it's worth, still grabbing one or whether you should go ahead and grab the previous version. And to kick it right off, let's go ahead and start talking about the performance, right? Because that's going to be one of the most obvious upgrades that you will find or that will differentiate this tablet from the previous one. Well, that and the color blue on the iPad Air 5 that everyone seems to be going after. I wasn't able to grab one, so I figured I'll just grab this color here. But in terms of difference, when it comes down to those colors, if you compare the iPad Air 5 to the iPad Air 4, you will notice that the iPad Air 4 is showing or is pushing more pastel colors, right? As opposed to the iPad Air 5 that seems to be presenting colors that are a lot more pronounced, right? So you have colors that are a little bit more saturated when compared to the iPad Air 4, where colors tended to lean more towards silver. Now, circling back to performance here, the iPad Air, this one, actually now supports 5G if you decide to go for that model, which is something that was not available on the last generation. This iPad has also seen a major increase in terms of processing power. It is loaded with the Apple M1 chip, which is such a powerful chip. And of course, as you would imagine, it pretty much double, I would say, the performance when you're looking at benchmark, right? So if you're looking at single versus multi-core, you will immediately notice that the performance there has almost doubled when compared to single and multi-core on the iPad Air 4. So as you would imagine, GPU performance is just top level. In terms of even editing videos, you could do 4K. This thing is very powerful. There's no denying that. On top of that, what Apple did with the RAM is double it, right? So on the previous iPad Air 4, you had 4 gigs of RAM, but here you have 8 gigs of RAM, of course, going with that M1 chip. Unfortunately, of course, it's still stuck at 70 hertz, right? Meaning there are a few things where processing power needs to be adjusted to kind of meet that 60 hertz, but we'll talk about that when we talk about the display, right? And by the way, before you forget, please make sure to hit both the like and the subscribe button there if you like the content. I truly appreciate that. But anyway, so we have 8 gigs of RAM, we have the M1 chipset here, which really pushes this iPad to the limit. And unfortunately, we still only have 64 gigs of internal storage. Now, it's my humble opinion that Apple is just so freaking stingy when it comes down to storage, right? It's sad to say, it's sad to see too, right? It's sad to see because when you have a 64 gigs of internal storage, given the fact that files are getting heavier, apps are getting a lot more sophisticated, so it's taking a lot more to build apps, and apps are just heavier as, more developers are making them more sophisticated. Videos are getting heavier. You have people now shooting 4Ks. I now do chat with people who like to shoot in 4K. And if you think about it, when you're buying a tablet like this one, you're planning on using it for about 5 years. Maybe not you. A lot of people who go after Apple tablets or Apple devices, many of those people claim that they go after those because they're supported for a long time, right? So you have people who will be buying an iPad Air 5 because they're planning on using it for the next 4 to 5 years, right? So if you figure now you have 64 gigs of internal storage, 2-3 years from today when apps, videos, and pictures are even heavier, where do you store those, right? Then comes the problem. If you want to go to the next option, which is 256, you'd have to drop $700, right? Because this one is going to run you $600, $599, and if you want to go to 256, that's going to be $699 or $700. Why would you even decide to do that when you can pick up an iPad Pro for $750 and get 128 gigs of internal storage, plus you get that super dope rear camera, right? You get ProMotion, you get a ton of different things, better specs when compared to what you have with the iPad Air 4 here. But I digress. So let me go ahead and just circle back to the tablet itself, right? So besides that, there are a few things that are not great, but I'm going to say that overall it has a lot of good things going for it, right? So for example, you get faster data transfer up to 10 gigabit per second. It's still not to the level of the iPad Pro that would run you 40 gigabit per second, but that is just because that's Thunderbolt, and that's just something else. Along with that relatively faster data transfer, compared to the iPad Air, you also have faster read and write speed here, which also means that the user experience is going to be enhanced, right? Because things seem to load faster. At least it's been my experience. Things are a lot more snappy on here, right? They flow pretty well despite that 60 hertz refresh rate. So overall performance, I have nothing to say about this. It's the M1 chip. The M1 chip that was found on the iPad Pro. Of course, when I reviewed that tablet, you saw what I said. It was just raw power. Same here. Sure, it's been adjusted to make sure that this stays in its lane, but it's still that very powerful chip. So I have nothing to say about it. Now, in regards to just user experience, still related to that performance, we all know that iPadOS limits what you can do with the tablet in terms of, multitasking and accessibility, right? When compared to like a Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 or a Tab S8 Plus or a Tab S7 even. What One UI allows you to do with those tablets is beyond the scope of what this guy is going to allow you to do, right? So you have so much power packed here, but still limited. Take split screen, for example, right? You're able to split the screen here and be able to work on one thing while you work on another thing. Plus, I said you have 8 gigs of RAM here. You have things running in the background, no issues whatsoever, but it's still limited. I just wish Apple could implement something that is similar to what Samsung has, right? Like a Samsung Dex that offers you a very interactive UI where you can use it like a laptop or a computer, but unfortunately we don't have that despite all of the power that is packed in this machine here. But anyway, so in terms of performance, it's been great. Nothing really out of the ordinary. When I'm using this or my iPad 9 that I have somewhere here, or even my iPhone, it's the same user experience generally. Unfortunately, of course, like I said, it has 60 hertz for the refresh rate. So there's certain things that may not be as smooth as, let's say, if you were coming from a Tab S7 or a Tab S7 or a Tab S8 or even an iPad Pro with, that ProMotion that you have available on the iPad Pro, right? So you don't have that here. And some of the stuff, especially when you compare them side by side, may not be as smooth. But anyway, that's enough with performance. We just know that it's going to be good. In terms of physical features, you pretty much get the usual suspect. Like I mentioned, design literally remained the same. It is the same tablet with the quad grill setup, right? So you have 4 grills for the speakers, but the reality is that you only have 2 speakers at the bottom, and I believe that's opposite of the camera, so it's going to be at the bottom here. So if you were to hold your tablet this way, you may be covering it, so you have to flip that over. You have the power button, which combos as a fingerprint sensor, and it works extremely well. It is, of course, Touch ID. You have that, but you do not have Face ID on here the way you would on iPhone or the iPad Pro. Now, even though they're only 2 speakers, they are pretty loud, right? They're fairly loud, especially given that there's only 2 of them. And, it's enjoyable if you're watching a movie or whatever, playing games, and you don't have your headphones and you just want to hear the sound directly from the speakers. You could do that. It definitely sounds pretty good. Now, in terms of the display, of course, you have that same display at 10.9 inches, and the resolution here is going to be 1640 by 2360. So the same thing as the iPad Air 4. It's pretty good for watching movies, like I said. And by the way, it is an IPS display. So pretty good for movies, playing video games on this, especially because you have all of that power. The only problem is that if you have a game that you really like that plays very well at, let's say, 120 hertz refresh rate, you wouldn't be able to do that, right? Because here you only have 60 frames per second. But that's for gamers, right? People who have something like, I don't know, Call of Duty, where they want to keep everything at the highest, you would not be able to do that here. It is, of course, still compatible with the Apple Pencil 2nd Gen, which is a pretty nice stylus, right? I have no issues with it, except for the tapping sound that it makes when you hit the display or when you hit the screen with the tip of that pen. But then again, other than that, it works very well. Really good for taking down notes, drawing, and all that good stuff. But I sure would imagine the latency along with the refresh rate at 60 hertz. Yeah, you won't get the same experience when compared to another flagship tablet out there. Let's take its own sibling, right? The iPad Pro with ProMotion, and you don't have that same latency, right? So you can definitely notice the drag or the little lag when you are taking down notes on the iPad Air 5 here versus, the iPad Pro. So just a few things to think about. Now, the camera is another thing that Apple did not upgrade here, right? So you still have that same camera, that same single camera with no flash on the back there. It would take decent pictures, decent videos, right? You'll be able to scan your documents and do all that stuff. So essentially the same stuff you would be able to do on the iPad Air 4. But the difference is on the front. So the front facing camera is pushing a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens with center stage integrated, right? You may be familiar with center stage. It's the same option that you have on like the Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 Ultra, where you have the lens, zooming out in order to make sure that it grabs as many of the subjects or as much of the light as possible. It is, of course, a very nice camera. You'll be good to go when chatting with family members, friends, coworkers, and all of that good stuff. Now, here's my take. The iPad Air 5 is showing a respectable level of upgrades, right? So something you can't even deny. Performance here is on another level when compared to the iPad Air 4. So that is something that is very palpable. However, on this channel, of course, I tend to lean more value oriented, right? Would I advise for someone to go ahead and buy this? Probably not, but it will depend, right? So first of all, if you want, I believe in live and let live. If you want to go ahead and buy it, by all means, right? But if you were to ask me if you should grab the iPad Air 5, I would say no. I would say go for the iPad Air 4 and upgrade. Go for the 256 gigs of the iPad Air 4 and pay less than what you would pay for this. I believe Walmart had a deal for $399 for the iPad Air 4, 64 gigs, and $499 for the 256 gigs. So if you find a deal like that, that is a much better deal. $599 or $600 for 64 gigs, you are bound to run out of space like immediately, because the system is going to take a good chunk of that space. And this is not even something like, let's say, the Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 or the S7, where not only do you get the 128 gigs, which is already double of what you would get from this, but you get the opportunity to actually expand that at up to 1 terabyte. Now, if you were going to go for the iPad Air 5 and go for 256 gigs, might as well add $50 and go for the 128 gigs of the Pro. Either way, I think it's a very good tablet, powerful tablet, but I think you should play around a little bit with the options and see what really better suits you. That's just my take here. Anyway, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you own one? Are you planning on buying one? Let me know in the comment section. I'm going to catch you in the comment section like I always do. Let's get this discussion going. And as always, of course, I truly appreciate you stopping by. Make sure to hit both the like and the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I'm going to catch you in the comment section. I am also going to catch you in the next video. And up until that next video, of course, as always, stay safe out there.